As you've probably heard by now, we've teamed up with BetMGM this season. We'll be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for our listeners each week. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code The Athletic, and you'll get a 1-year subscription to The Athletic, plus up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. Here's how it works. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using bonus code The Athletic. Make your first deposit of at least $10. Place your first bet on any game and claim your voucher for a 1-year subscription to The Athletic. See BetMGM.com for terms. U.S. promotional offers not available in D.C., Mississippi, New York, Nevada, Ontario, or Puerto Rico. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Available in the U.S. Call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369 in New York. Call 1-800-NEXT-STEP in Arizona. 1-800-327-5050 in Massachusetts. 1-800-BETS-OFF in Iowa. 1-800-270-7117 for confidential help in Michigan. 1-800-981-0023 in Puerto Rico. First bet offer for new customers only in partnership with Kansas Crossing Casino and Hotel. Don't forget, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, use bonus code The Athletic, and you'll get a 1-year subscription to The Athletic, plus up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager.
Don't you love it when things are both easier and more affordable? Like when the rain washes your car for you. Or like when you save up to 10% by bundling your renters and auto insurance with USAA. Bundle with USAA and start saving. Get a quote today.
It's time for basketball, and Uber Eats is dropping deals on game day favorites to keep you locked in on the action. Like when you're craving a buzzer beater, but also buffalo wings. Or when an upset makes you want to ugly cry into a pizza. And right now, Uber Eats has game day deals from Burger King, Buffalo Wild Wings, KFC, and hundreds more local favorites. So you can keep your eyes on the ball and your hands on a burger. Order now, only on Uber Eats. Product availability varies by region. See app for details.
The Athletic.
When Marc Marquez finally got defeated in a 2025 MotoGP race, you didn't think it would be in the normal, quiet way, did you? You didn't think it would be like a pitch to second or down in third. No, it was going to be something crazy, messy, and controversial, and that is what Marc delivered at the circuit of the Americas. He didn't just crash out from the race lead, he triggered a massive controversy before that. This is the Race MotoGP podcast. I'm Matt Beer. Me, Simon Patterson, and Val Khorounzhiy are going to attempt to unravel quite a lot of stuff in a podcast we're starting in the middle of the night European time for me and Val. Simon is just having the time of his life in mid-evening in America. Still, yeah, he looks happy.
It's sunny outside, look. It's a window behind.
Yeah, I'm not going to show you my windows there. It's quite dark. As Duncan Bertram in the Race Members Club put it, is there even much to discuss this week? Duncan was obviously taking the piss because there's tons. And we're going to start at the start of the race, or rather the aborted start. We've got so many opinions on this, Simon.
Can I just point out that you know it's late whenever the first person in the podcast to break the swearing rule is Matt?
Yeah. Is piss swearing? We'll find out when producer Johnny does or doesn't use a beat button.
George Carlin says it is.
Yeah, he does,
doesn't he?
Remember
correctly.
I know the segment you mean.
Yeah.
Right, opinions of what happened at the start. So there's a range of them. I go straight into the Members Club comments on Patreon. Michael Sanderson said, it looked as though Marquez and his team planned they would change to a slick bike at last minute. Should he have been penalised? Ben called it absolutely shambolic. I thought it was hugely unfair that the riders starting this chaos basically screwed everyone else. The races started without the riders in the pit lane. They could run behind. Then it starts to... Oh, actually, I'll do Amanda Kirshner. Kind of defends Mark. She says, race direction made the call for the restart. Mark was lined up for the pit start. It was not his fault. Someone decided to change the start. Matt, but not me, on the flip side, says that was extremely Machiavellian from Mark. Do you think it was too far? And then we've got a few surreal ones. Andy Keck's lengthy summary includes a rider that somehow ended up without a bike, more on Maverick Vinales in a minute, people online arguing bitterly about who should be penalised for a rule that no one could identify. Here's my question, quite simply, what the hell? And Stuart Coulter says, not a question, but Maverick Vinales running about on the grid with no bike is the most Maverick Vinales thing I've seen yet. So, set the scene. It's the start of the race in a few minutes' time. It's been wet in the build-up. Almost everybody is on wet tyres. And then something strange happens. Simon, would you like to describe what happens, starting at the Marc Marquez end of the grid, and then there's a kind of trickle down, isn't there?
Marc Marquez is very, very obviously watching the game, watching what's happening, watching the weather, watching the track dry out. We've just seen Moto2 that started in similar conditions and dried out, so people know what to expect here. And whether or not he's told that there's a few people on the grid on slicks or not, I'm not sure. But he clearly has a strategy planned with the team that they need to have the slick bike, the dry bike ready in pit lane. And at a point, he has a yes or no decision to make on whether or not he runs in and jumps on it. And at a moment, he decides, yes, I'm going to do that. Pecco Bagnaia is watching Marc Marquez like a hawk at this point, which is a lesson that Jorge Martin could have learned back in Misano last year in that flag-to-flag race when he didn't pit when Pecco did. Yeah. And all of a sudden, Marc goes, Pecco goes, and then everyone else goes. Not everyone else, and that's important.
No, that's
not
the crucial
everyone else. So I have spent a lot of today in the rulebook trying to figure out what rules were broken. And essentially, it's like this. The rules say if you leave your motorbike for weather-related conditions after pit lane has closed, and pit lane closes 5 minutes after the start of the sighting lap, so a long time before this, right?
Yeah.
If you leave your bike for weather-related reasons, then it's pretty simple. You start the warm-up lap from pit lane exit, you form up in your grid position, and you serve a long lap, or you serve a ride-through penalty, which is like a 50-second penalty, if not longer at COTA. Unless more than 10 bikes do the same thing. And that was brought in, I can't remember if it was brought in after that chaotic Sachsenring pit lane start of 2014 or after the Argentina pit lane start of 18. Where Miller was that guy sitting at the front of the bike.
I think it's the Miller thing. Yeah, I think it's the Miller thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because they had to justify basically
exactly
in the rules for why we can't have that many people line up on pit exit.
Yeah. If you weren't following MotoGP in 2018, this is the Termas de Rio Honda race where pole sitter Jack Miller guesses correctly that slicks are required and everyone else goes, oh, whoops. They all go to the pit lane. Jack Miller's left alone on the grid with, in theory, a massive advantage, but race direction go, we can't do this.
Race direction then cancels the start of the race. At some point during the process where they cancel the start of the race, Maverick Vinales is running up and down the grid without a motorcycle. The last time Maverick was on the grid without a motorcycle, he just tried to blow up a Yamaha. So we cancel the start. There's 3 guys on slicks who, one of whom, Davide Tardozzi's rider, Iogura, and then Davide Brivio, and then Brivio immediately goes in an angry rant to everyone that'll listen to him about what a joke this is for his rider who'd made the right call. And then we have a full restart as per the rules that if more than 10 riders pull off the grid, we have a full restart. So we do the full restart from the normal grid positions with everyone on slick tyres. But here's the thing, right? There wasn't 10 of them that pulled off the grid. There was 9 of them, and there was still 12 bikes sitting on the grid.
No, there were 10 of them, but you need 11.
There was 10
but
of them, sorry.
11.
It's more than 10. Yeah. So there was still 12 bikes sitting on the grid whenever they decided that we weren't having a race. So in theory, those other 10 guys should have had like 1 minute penalties, nearly 1 minute penalties added to their race time. Marquez admitted afterwards that he absolutely did it deliberately, knowing that most or at least some people would follow his call. What he didn't bet on was that quite a few people had thought who understood the rulebook as well and who could count because they were at the back of the grid, not the front of the grid, had thought to themselves, I'll just pit at the end of lap 1 for a dry bike and it'll not be that much of a difference. And actually, in reality, it probably wouldn't have been much different time-wise from a ride-through penalty anyway.
I'm not sure. I think it would have been...
You're talking 5 or 10 seconds. Well, you're not talking hours. You know?
Honestly, I think if Mark's in the pits and nobody follows him, and this, obviously we'll never know, but I think he finishes 4th. I'm fairly confident because...
Behind the 3 who started on slicks.
Behind the 3 who started on slicks ahead of everybody else. Because the track was good.
I think if Mark's the only one who does it and has to do a ride-through penalty, Mark finishes in the same position he did finish in because trying to make mad overtakes on damp patches off the racing line would have just launched him quicker than he eventually launched himself anyway.
Point taken. Fair enough.
Yeah. The weird circumstances of today. It wouldn't have been an Argentina 2017 where he came from the back of the grid and just rode literally through some people because of the damp patches wouldn't have allowed him to, right? So... race control then put out a statement afterwards saying, we cancelled the start of the race for safety reasons, which is the standard get out of jail free card by race control. And the reality is that they absolutely screwed up today. And they probably cost Iogura a race win, maybe even, as the guy that was sitting on the grid in slick tyres. Because Bastianini was on slicks and he was a little bit uncomfortable. Binder was on slicks and broke down. So, yeah, Aguirre should have won today's race, and race control are an absolute bunch of charlatans that should be taken out back and slapped, because that was just inappropriate. It was like club racing stuff. Can
I defend, as I usually do, the powers that be? Because I'm such a yeah.
Go for it.
Look,
Go for it, Val.
If I'm in that position, I see Maverick Vinales running on the grid, and I see what's going on in the pit lane, I get the idea of, better safe than sorry at this point. Call off the start. I think my problem isn't with how the race was orchestrated. My problem is that, man, the stuff they implemented after 2018, after that Miller thing, just didn't work at all, and clearly just fell apart at the first attempt of implementation. Do you think we were going to have a good race if they followed the rules? Do you think it was going to be safe? And
No, but it can't be about good racing or not, because then you're letting the entertainment side of the sport dictate the rules.
No. But,
and you can't do that.
I mean, a good isn't safe. Genuinely, good isn't like a safe, orderly proceeding of what.
But they could have done a 30-second delayed start. They do that in other circumstances. There is a 30-second delayed start board somewhere in the starter's booth that they could have slung out, and then just basically told everyone who's still in the grid spot, you're not allowed to move, and dragged everyone else off the grid. Everyone else in this situation being Maverick Vinales, because it's also worth pointing out that by the point that Maverick was flapping about on the grid, Marc Marquez was on a second bike at pit lane exit, ready to go racing.
Yeah. But I think
it was all Maverick Vinales' fault, and he should have been I genuinely no. If you stop a race from starting on time because you're running around like an idiot, you shouldn't be allowed to start it. He should have been black flagged out of the race.
There's still no good answer, and I suspect we might get one at some point. There's still no good answer for why Maverick Vinales was running around.
They had technical problems. The bike cut out twice. But the bike also...
I heard that answer. Isn't that about the second start that he's talking about?
No. The bike cut out on both, I think.
Okay, well...
Yeah, no. I spoke to the team afterwards. The bike was playing up. Okay. It's what happened to him at the end of the race as well, because he suddenly disappeared down the timing sheets and lost 18 seconds in the last lap because the bike went into limp mode. So there was an electronics gremlin in the bike all weekend, and that's so he wasn't trying to. He was the one person not trying to get off the grid because he wanted to change his tires.
Oh, that's such a Maverick.
I still don't know how the next step after that is just to run somewhere. I mean, to be fair, it's kind of.
Do you know, like I don't think it's just because we've been in America, because we're in the US, right? But there's been loads and loads of Talladega Night references this weekend, and it's like, the scene where he thinks he's on fire. That's what it was like.
Getting back to the serious point Val was trying to make, because I want to agree with Val on this first point, that once you've got Maverick Vinales running around the grid and everything else that's going on at that point, don't forget who's in the pit and who's on the track. Just stop, pause. I don't think this was fixable in 30 seconds. I understand why they didn't use the 30-second board. The problem for me is after that, it's like that's when the penalties should kick in.
I agree,
but that seems like an even bigger mess to untangle in terms of how much is Ducati going to object. And does the letter of the rules definitely hold up under scrutiny with how it's written around that circumstance?
I have a question for the two of you. If the 8 riders that had pulled off the grid had been headed up by Raul Fernandez and those behind him, would we have started on time? Would they have been forced to serve the long lap penalties? Was it the fact that it was Marc Marquez in the front row of the grid that influenced the decision?
No, I don't think so, because Marc's been penalised for this kind of thing before, so no, I don't think so.
I don't know if that made a difference to the penalties, but I do wonder if if it had been at the tail end of the grid coming off the grid,
maybe
that might have made a more potentially orderly start, and they could have gone with it.
I think also the fact that it looked like everybody was in a different sequence of starting in that moment, I think was part of the consideration, because it was just like the moving pieces were not moving in any sort of sensible way. No. Some riders, as Simon said, Marc was on pit lane exit, but we saw only 5 of the 10 bikes on pit lane exit, which means the other ones were going to be gunning it on warm-up lap, trying to catch up to the grid or doing whatever. I mean, you have mechanisms to fix all that. I know. I agree.
But also, we do flag-to-flag races.
Yeah.
Anything that would have happened there was safer than a flag-to-flag race in that regards.
I think also, for me, it is, there was going to be, I think, a 9-rider pit lane start anyway at the end of the formation lap, because I think everybody would have pulled in, or at least that's a possibility for me.
Yeah.
Everybody who wasn't on soft, because remember, 9 guys stayed out on wets that were clearly, quickly rendered untenable. So I think the quick... So here's what I think is actually like the biggest culprit is, when they were on the siding lap, the track was wet as hell, super wet. Fabio crashed for no reason. Every rider who spoke was like, you can't even think slicks at that point. Then you spend 5 hours on the grid for all the nonsense, and you run out of time to obviously have 2 bikes set up in very different ways. You can't switch tires all that quickly, so you have to. The race has changed. The race that you went out to the pits has completely changed to the race that you're facing now, and the flexibility isn't there in the rules to help you fix that, I guess.
Just to throw it in there really quickly, changing from a wet bike to a dry bike is not changing tires. It's changing clutch, it's changing suspension components, not just suspension settings. It's changing like a full electronics map. It's not the 1 minute job that it used to be of taking out a set of tires, putting in another set, and doing a few clicks in the front forks. It's a job.
Yeah, which is why you've not seen, because I think Marc realized pretty early once the pit lane closed that actually, it needs to be slicks, but they couldn't do anything by then except for try to get the race stopped.
Well, he did say that he'd already made sure with crew chief Daniele Romagnoli that the second bike was in the other configuration, that it was ready to go before he made his decision to go once again to go full Usain Bolt at Coda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Think you accidentally gave Marc Marquez Jorge Martin's crew chief.
I really did.
Daniele Romagnoli.
Yeah, I did.
It's Marc
Rigamonti. Of course it is.
Let's hear Marquez describing that in his own words, because we've probably stress tested the race control approach to this, but a lot of our members' questions are about Marc's own antics here. So this is Marc's description of how he went about that decision.
Marc, can you explain what happened just before the original race start, leaving the grid?
Yeah, we did everything perfect today, especially that strategy on leaving the grid, because I realized when remain was raining a lot, when remain 15 minutes and back straight was full wet. But then when remain 8-7 minutes, I realized that we did a mistake with the rain. But then also I understand that most of the riders were with the rain. So I asked to Rigamonti, my chief mechanic, is the second bike was ready. He told me yes, and then I say, okay, maybe I will leave the grid. Because I knew that if more than 10 riders follow me, start delayed and everybody start on the grid. So is what I tried to force, that everybody follow me, because like this we restart everybody with the slick, and the race was in the point where I like.
Can you understand why some people might think that's a bit chappy? Is a difficult decision to make, Marc?
It was difficult, but I was clever and quiet. I mean, and still right now I'm quiet. Okay, I did a mistake today, but I feel quiet and this is the most important to take the correct decisions.
Marquez was pretty upfront about his tactics there, and the fact he was basically playing the rules to maximum advantage. He had no qualms about doing that. He kind of described it as, we did everything perfectly in that decision at the start. Knowing that he was going to cause an aborted start, knowing that he was basically forcing other riders to kind of jump with him and really force race control's hand. Val, was this within the realms of fair play? With some of the comments we've had on Patreon suggested that it wasn't.
Yeah, I think it's totally fine. I have very little issue with that. It's because in this sort of type of racing, fair play doesn't really enter into it. It's not an on-track situation. It's by that moment, it's like bureaucracy, degenerate gambling nonsense. It's you know what I mean? Like, it's not having somebody off. It's trying to win an organizational roulette. I have no issue with it at all.
But it's the thing that I know it wasn't like he was suddenly triggering old style Le Mans 24-hour start of everyone sprinting across the grid as cars are setting off. I know it's like only the warm-up lap. I know there was time still. But he was doing this knowing, Simon, that it was going to trigger mayhem of some kind. And he wasn't fussed about that.
I mean, it was a reverse Le Mans start where everyone was sprinting away from their bikes.
Yeah, true.
No, he knew exactly what he was doing. Like there was like no like he was upfront about it. He knew exactly what he was doing, and actually, the only reason he was unhappy was because it didn't quite work the way that he planned it to. He was one bike short of creating a stampede. But yeah, 100%. That was he was two, because technically Maverick wasn't trying to change tires. Yeah. But yeah, like he knew what he was up to. And he straight up said in his debrief, like, I know the Rulebook's better than the rest of them.
Yeah. Although, actually, I was impressed by how many riders knew the 9 versus 11 versus 10 element and were kind of quoting on, will I get a penalty, will I not get a penalty? There were some baffled people as well.
Guys, I spent more time explaining that to like team members this afternoon than to riders, which is normally the other way around.
Yeah. But, people weren't, I wouldn't say anybody on the grid in terms of riders was that frustrated with Marquez. The frustration was more around race control, more around the rules. There was quite a bit of sympathy, even from the people who caused the start to be aborted. There was quite a bit of sympathy for Agura, Binder and Bastianini, who had their chance taken away. Not that it put anyone off going for that dash and aborting the start. They just felt a little bit bad about it afterwards. But did you think that sympathy was genuine, Val?
Yeah, no, it's certainly genuine. It makes sense to me. I don't massively share it. Like, I share it a little bit, but not hugely. Like, it's not a coincidence that the 3 riders who did that were on row 6.
Yeah.
They had very little to lose. And in fact, I am surprised that the guys behind them didn't do it. I mean, Lorenzo Savadori probably would have done it if his shoulder was intact. He would have probably had a go. Mm-hmm. It's just, we've done this whole weekend of all these sessions, right? And then you almost like gift wrap a potential podium with no competition to 3 guys just because they were in a bad enough grid position, in a meaningless enough championship position to roll the dice. That's not even like it. Okay, part of it is judging the local weather and how quickly the track dries and how closely you watched other sessions, how closely you watched maybe the Moto2 race and what exactly happened there, even though in the Moto2 race, the guys who started on slicks actually got super, super, super screwed. But that's part of it. I just don't think that part of the skill set should be worth totally overriding the whole weekend. Like, by the letter of the law, I think they absolutely got hosed and screwed. There's 3 guys, 100%. I agree, but even you could hear it in like Enea Bastianini when he talked about it after the race. He was like, "Yeah, like it should have been better for us, but also we were just gambling anyway. Because when I was on the side in the lap, it was clearly not for slicks, so we were just doing stuff." I don't know.
I think in a 40 race season, one race where you go, "Oh, let's just turn everything upside down and let this punt play out," is absolutely fine. Also, I don't think Brad Binder thought he was doing a tactic. He was just like, it's a wet track, so I run slicks. That works out, doesn't it? That was just his plan.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
I can say to my new Samsung Galaxy S25 Ultra, hey, find a keto-friendly restaurant nearby and text it to Beth and Steve. And it does without me lifting a finger. So I can get in more squats anywhere I can. 1, 2, 3.
Will that be cash or credit?
Credit. 4.
Galaxy S25 Ultra, the AI companion that does the heavy lifting so you can do you. Get yours at Samsung.com. Compatible with select apps. Requires Google Gemini account. Results may vary based on input. Check responses for accuracy.
This episode is brought to you by Walmart. New beauty is in bloom at Walmart, and it's all about springtime radiance. From Drybar, Tula Skincare, and hundreds more available online, Walmart has the premium brands you want and this season's on-trend products for flawless, glossy hair and hydrated skin. Big name beauty brands? Check. The things you love? Check. Find trending spring beauty and all you need to look and feel gorgeous at Walmart, on app and online.
When the race did get going, the penalty-free Marc Marquez quickly pulled out a couple of seconds lead like he does in every race pretty much in 2025 at some point. Seemed to be heading for yet another COTA win, and then he shunted it out of the lead. He admitted he pulled across too far onto the turn 4 curb that was still damp. Pecco Bagnaia, following him, did say he knew that curb was damp. He hadn't been using it as much because it was damp. So a little bit of Marc chancing his arm in the kind of classic Marquez style there. Again, interesting difference of opinion among the members club basically on how close to the edge Marc is at the moment. Now, he did crash on Friday pretty nastily in the wet as well. He had an amazing save at the start of the sprint and managed to quickly re-overtake his brother and Pecco and still win. Ben said from the start it felt as if Marc wanted to show how he's smarter and better than everybody, and with that he was getting too greedy. And then we've got a little kind of mini argument breaking out in the comments between Moto Bell saying, are we overselling the adaptation of Marquez to Ducati? He looks like he's wearing a straitjacket riding the GP25, almost like Jorge Lorenzo, I guess referencing Lorenzo's time at Ducati. He doesn't look like himself. If I had to speak in a British accent at work every day, I'm sure I will slip up and not perform at my highest. Pecco has an edge in his natural style being the GP25 style, to which Aaron quickly replied, if being in a straitjacket means you've won 5 out of 6 sprint/races to start the year, sign me up. Simon, do you feel Marc has been almost underestimated, I think is what Moto Bell's saying there, in terms of it looks like the speed's just coming naturally, but he has had his moments along the way. Does that argument not quite hold water? Is he actually absolutely fine with this bike?
First of all, I think that Val is someone that has to pretend to have a British accent every day at work and not slip up.
What is my actual accent?
Welsh,
who knows?
We know this.
Who knows? Secondly, we actually talked about this over the weekend with Marc. He says his riding style has changed, and he doesn't know whether or not that's because the Ducati needs a different riding style or because if he's still somewhat physically limited by his right arm. And he says he genuinely doesn't know, but he knows he's sitting further back in the bike. He's sitting up straighter. He's less over the front of it. He's not loading the front tire the way that the Honda absolutely needed the front tire loaded to go fast on. That was the thing, wasn't it? That was what made Marc so good on a Honda when no one else was. It was because he had just a pure raw talent to overload the tire and still get feedback from it. And he said the good thing about not having to ride like that anymore is that it's why he's not crashing the way that he used to crash in the Honda. This is the guy that would crash 20 times a season and still win the title. So he admits that yes, 100% his riding style has changed. And I think maybe what we're seeing is that he looks very different on the bike. But it could be that because instead of racing something that's shorter than it is wide, like the Honda, he's now racing a drag bike. He doesn't know the answer to the question.
Val, you were not massively impressed with Marquez chucking it away like this, is fair to say. By the time this podcast is out, I think listeners/viewers, you'll have seen our latest YouTube video as well, in which we kind of look into Marquez's mistake and general COTA antics, and he didn't need to be going that aggressively over that curb at that point and bidding 25 points, did he?
No, I don't think so. And I think that's if there's one weakness to Marc's game, I think so much has been made of Pecco Bagnaia chucking results down the road, but in some ways Marc Marquez is the OG of that kind of thing recently. If his fans will forgive me, there's nothing else to latch onto, but I'm pretty sure it has come up on this podcast already that I've said, if there's one weakness, it's that points will just go randomly for no rhyme or reason, for they're not really supposed to. When it happened in 2019 during his record season, he had more of a margin than this. He could afford it. It really does undo so much of the good start to the season for me, in the sense that this was a run of tracks to preserve a certain advantage. And now, because of one minor but significant error, that advantage is gone. Remember, there's so much has been said of, how comfortable he's been, how he's dominating every race, etc., how he's, winning while using, 10% of his capacity, etc., not really pushing, not doing anything. But even if you looked already at Argentina, at a couple of those moments, you're like, I think the risk reward might be a little off. I think something like, there were moments in Argentina where that 25-pointer could have easily been a 0, chasing after his brother Alex. Then at the start of the sprint here in Kota, that could have easily been a 0 instead of a 12. Yeah. Or that could have been a fall into the pack and getting injured. And again, it was strange track conditions, and it's easy to say don't crash, ride quickly and don't crash. Obviously, it's very easy to say. But I think the level of comfort has been consistently overstated. And also the level of how much Pecco Bagnaia is, suffering, can't live with him, can't put any pressure on him, has also been overstated considerably, I think. I don't, we'll get to Pecco in a second, but were you guys shocked when Marc went down?
Yeah, I was still. Okay. I know he does this. I know he's done this at Kota, even though it's such a strong track for him. But I was still like, why did that? To me, that didn't feel like that was part of this year's script at this point. I will, like you say, we'll get onto Pecco in a second. And Marc has had his moments and his mistakes, but he's recovered so well. His margins have been so big most of the time. I thought this sort of error would start happening when he was so far ahead in the championship that he kind of lost interest and concentration. Like in 2020, basically, I could see this becoming 2014 now. Yeah. He'll do like 7 crashes in September or something, but it doesn't matter by then. I didn't see it happening now, but Simon, you clearly did.
Well, here's the weird thing about it. Marc was kind of hung up in 2019 all weekend.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. He kept referencing, no. He said in the press conference on Thursday, I have to be pessimistic because I've crashed out of the lead here before.
Yeah.
And then brought it up again and again. So it was in his head. And after we did all the media and everything, I bumped into Pecco in the paddock on Sunday night, tonight, just a few hours ago. And he was like, I had a premonition this morning that I was going to win today. And kind of jokingly admitted, I know a thing or two about crashing out of the race lead. So he wasn't doing it to fire shots or anything like that. So there was a real sense of Marc could do this. Marc very, very closely did this in the sprint. And, on one hand, he's had an almost flawless start to the season. 5 wins out of 6, his brother alongside him every time, blah, blah, blah. And yet we're 3 rounds in, he's won nearly everything, and the championship lead over Pecco is 11 points.
Yeah.
Yep. Pecco's not done a bad job, has he?
I'm going to argue that he has in a second still. But I want to throw to Etienne in the Members Club, who says that the TNT commentators mentioned that Bagnaia has found what was missing to get his groove back. Do you have more details about what was missing in the first place? Simon, yes. Go for it.
So he's so analytical sometimes. He told us in Argentina that he was going to spend the next 10 days studying. He told us on Thursday that he'd watched everything over and over again in the gap in between. And that he had really clearly identified that he was too slow in the second part of corner entry, the point between letting off the brakes and hitting the corner apex, that he was too slow there, and that he had some ideas to try and figure out what he was doing wrong. He tried to implement them on Friday, and he was like, yeah, you know what, I think they're there, but it's damp, so I'm not really sure. He said on Saturday, actually we've made a bit of a step there. And basically, he went and looked at where he was missing out. Whatever they've done, he's found a little bit of that feeling that was gone. He feels like he's got his confidence back a little bit. He kind of said that there's still maybe a little bit of work to do in Qatar, but we're going to be doing that work at Losail, a circuit I really like and that Marc doesn't really like, and that's going to make it easier to do the work there. I think that he's one of those riders, and I've seen a few of them over the years at this level, who everything has to be just so. And if there's a slightest little thing that's not quite feeling right, it's like the princess and the pea, that story where it's like that, where if there's a little bit of thing that wrong, it becomes a huge deal. And Pecco seems to be one of those. And we're getting closer to, getting rid of the pea below the bottom mattress. He's getting close now to finding things in that sweet spot. And when he's in that sweet spot, we've seen before, he can be unbeatable when he's in there.
I have a good, robust theory for what they've changed on the bike, or not on the bike, what they've changed from Termas to now. What they've changed is they've left Termas and went to Circuit of the Americas. I don't buy it. I don't buy there's been some sort of huge breakthrough. He finished 5 seconds off at Termas. He was going to finish 3 seconds off today. Cool. He's better here than at Termas. I just, I need a bigger sample size. I feel like it's just, you hear it all the time, how riders suddenly find a huge breakthrough when they're just at a better track or get a better result because 15 people in front of them have crashed. Suddenly it's like, oh yeah, I felt much better on the bike today. Like it's so consistently corresponding to the position that you finished in, which is just so not scientific. And, Pecco's smarter than that. So look, I'm sure he's made considerable progress. I just don't think that's what's done the big swing. I guess that's my.
And in fairness to Pecco, after the sprint on Saturday, even he was saying, "I've made progress. I can't win tomorrow. I'm not going to beat Marc on raw pace." He wasn't expecting to do that, and he was very open in saying he won this race because Marc crashed out. He was following Marc, seeing what he was doing, and knew he couldn't do the same. The question is going to be, was this because it's still not one of his circuits, and it's very much one of Marc's circuits? When they get to La Salle, does that change? Because I'm a weird combo of Pecco optimist and Pecco skeptic in that I wrote, when we did our verdict column on whether we're reassessing everything we thought about Bagnaia in light of him being up against Marquez, I wrote that I hadn't. I still think Pecco's great and he fully deserves his 2 championships. I think Pecco has been rubbish by his standards so far this season, but he's capable of so much better and he can be so much better. But I don't think it's been small margins. I think he's been absolutely smashed all year by the old bike with the slower Marquez on it, as well as by Marc. So, he was great on that opening lap of the sprint. Val, I think in our work chat, you referred to it as just not bothering to brake into the first corner. And I'm just suggesting everyone should do it. But, those were strong moves. He passed Marquez twice there. It was the ease with which he was then completely dispatched and left behind. Pecco argued that he was coming on stronger later in the race, but also Marc was controlling that, and Pecco admitted that himself as well. So I don't think we've seen the pace yet. We have seen more perkiness. We have seen more confidence. Pecco's looked much more likely at Austin to get back into the fight at some point soon, but I don't think we're there yet. However, he is suddenly, like you say, completely there in the points.
And heading to Qatar.
Yeah.
Because of I said some deeply cynical and unkind things just now, I also want to say that Pecco keeps impressing me by how he goes against type in a way when conditions are a bit weird. Because he's the kind of rider who, methodical work through the weekend, you get better and better and better with more track time. That's exactly the kind of rider you would expect to suck and be awful every time the track is a bit wet or something weird has happened. And
really good point.
But he gets it. He gets it. He understands what he needs to do. He's gathered himself, and we've seen it in his championship winning seasons, and we've seen it again today. I thought, is he going to plummet down the order because the grip's going to be a bit sketchy and the low grip specialists like Marc, Alex, Jack Miller, Johan Zarco are going to power through? And instead, Pecco was immediately hounding Alex Marquez and got him pretty soon. So I'm consistently impressed by how he's able to really step it up when it counts, even in conditions that we don't necessarily consider his.
On a similar note, I find him really quite resilient mentally for someone that is quite a thinker.
Yeah.
It's the riders that are thinkers that tend to get a bit rattled by things, and he's not. And you always kind of feel, I think maybe that's why there's been this perception for the last few weeks that he has been rattled, and there's been a lot of it on social media. And I think it's just because of his personality. It's because he's that kind of softly spoken, thinks what he's going to say, can be quite pensive. I think people think that means Marc is capable of very easily rattling him, but he just seems to take it in a stride.
We've got a long way into this episode. without mentioning the World Championship leader properly. I'm going to throw it to the Members Club again. By the way, members, so many new faces, new names in the questions for this episode. I absolutely love that. The Members Club's growing and growing. It's not just growing on the F1, so I've got more people in riders as well. Simon?
I'm pretty sure that the entire Members Club is in Austin this weekend. I've seen so many people this weekend. It's been awesome. There are so many people here that just have loved to tell me that they listen to the podcast. It's amazing. So thank you every one of you, because it's so cool.
No, I would really, really appreciate that. Well, like we often said, we really enjoy doing this. We have a lot of fun, the three of us talking nonsense about bikes at all hours of the day and night. And the fact that there's a lot of you out there enjoying it with us is absolutely brilliant. Members, we have so many questions about the events of Austin. We had loads even after the sprint. We will rattle through a bunch more in next week's episode as well, because we're only going to scratch the surface of everything in the madness in this episode. So if you are part of the Members Club, you will get your question answered next week if you haven't this week. If you're not part of the Members Club yet, you can try it out for free for 7 days. Just look for the race on Patreon. We're back to a question from the Members Club. Jag says, can Alex Marquez finish every event in second and win the title if Marc and Pecco split the wins and fall down occasionally? I think I can accurately predict how whichever one of you answers this first is going to answer it, but let's see if I'm right. Simon, you were laughing loudest. You can answer first.
Why do you think that Alex Marquez is going to be Mr. Consistency in the face of the other two, given everything we know about him?
Yep, I called it. Yeah, so basically I was thinking you can say any other rider. Maybe not Ralph Fernandez. Maybe not Joan Mir. We'll get onto that. In that, can X finish second every time and win the championship? However, Alex Marquez right now is finishing second or third in every race. So like I said last week, look at the actual results. He is being consistent. Val, do you see any world in which Pecco and Marc kind of live up to their self-parody levels of crashing out of race leads so much that Alex Marquez becomes world champion?
No, but look, it's fun to imagine a situation where he's, because he was managed by Emilio Alzamora, wasn't he? And Alzamora won his title in 125 without winning a single race. And I also, this is terrible content for a MotoGP podcast, but also remember that Esteban Ocon GP3 season where he finished second 9 times in a row? That was very funny. Won the championship.
No, I also, like you, I also cover F1 and I don't remember that, to be honest, either. So.
Well, yeah, I do. Honestly, I think about it regularly. It's my Roman Empire, as they would say last year. I think, you know what, for all of my skepticism, this was a really good weekend by Alex. Really, really good. Yeah. I'm more impressed by it than by Thailand or Turnos.
Oh, totally.
Yeah,
yeah.
Because this isn't normally his track.
Because it's not his track. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And he was still, basically every session up where he needed to be, okay, so on Sunday, maybe ideally you then win that race if Marc goes down and Pecco had his number over the full race distance, but still very potent, very impressive, just doing the right things. Basically, he's not messed up like all season. I can't think of a single race or session or meaningful error that Alex Marquez has made. Spoilers, number one in my rider rankings, if that's come out or whether that's not come out, it's not going to be Pecco. It's not going to be the race winner. That's because Alex has been bulletproof. It's been awesome. Now, it's still, for me, 3-round sample size on a satellite bike.
Yeah, but that's okay. Last year, this didn't happen for basically tyre-based reasons, but the previous 2 years, we've been sat in front of these microphones going, let's not talk too hard about Enea Bastianini's title chance because that'll fade. Let's not talk too hard about Marco Bezzecchi's title chance because that'll fade. Okay, they didn't end up being world champions on the year-old Ducatis, but they were still in the conversation come September, October, and I feel like at the moment I'm waiting for the point where Alex disappears from the top 3 and there's absolutely no sign of it coming.
Yeah, well, here's my also, we haven't seen the full makeup of that battle yet. Because I don't. Yeah. If Alex is in that, and if Alex stays in that, then I think Fabio Di Giannantonio is about to join it.
Yeah, this.
So yeah,
100%. There's 2 things I say about Alex's season. And about his weekend. One is that there is zero chance, literally zero chance of him having an amazing season where he only finishes second and somehow cruises to a title. There is a much, and I know I'm not saying this to take away from him because Val's laughing at me. I'm saying this because there is a much, much higher chance of Alex winning races this year. I think he will win races this year. There will be a circumstance where he has the beating of Pecco and Marc does something stupid, or do you know what? He's just better than him. He does have that there this year. He's been a different, he's got that maturity, he's got that extra speed, and he's only had one unofficial visit, from what I understand, to race control so far for something involving other riders, which is it's also quite a. But all of that aside as well, it's really nice to see a world that we're in where Alex Marquez is leading the world championship and not Marc Marquez, entirely on Alex Marquez's own merit. He's leading the championship and he's not doing it because Marc's injured or, someone's riding a Kawasaki 600 against the rest of the motor. You know what I mean? He's genuinely there because he's been the most fast, consistent rider in the world over the first 3 races. That's awesome. I really like that for him because he is perennially the little brother, and it's nice to see him. You know what I mean? It's like the ultimate FU to anyone that has ever said he's only in MotoGP because of who his brother is.
I should say, for me, there is an important caveat that he is the fastest and the best out of 6 guys. I mean, no, okay, fair point, well made. But yeah, but also he was a Gresini Ducati rider before Marc was, so he didn't even get the seat because of Marc. Marc only got his seat at Ducati because of Alex.
There are people out there all across the country pushing boundaries to grow the game of golf, like champion speed golfer Lauren Cupp, who plays faster than anyone else. And Will Lowry, whose work in the golf community inspires more kids to get into the game. As a champion partner of the Masters, Bank of America supports everyone determined to find out what's possible in golf and in life. What would you like the power to do? Bank of America. Bank of America NA, member FDIC, copyright 2025, Bank of America Corporation, all rights reserved.
Ryan Reynolds here from Mint Mobile, with a message for everyone paying big wireless way too much. Please, for the love of everything good in this world, stop. With Mint, you can get premium wireless for just $15 a month. Of course, if you enjoy overpaying, no judgments, but that's weird. Okay, one judgment. Anyway, give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month plan, equivalent to $15 per month required. Intro rate first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See full terms at mintmobile.com.
This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was getting frustrated by your forms. Now, Taxes is uploading your forms with a snap, and a TurboTax expert will do your taxes for you. One who's backed by the latest tech, which cross-checks millions of data points for absolute accuracy, all of which makes it easy for you to get the most money back, guaranteed. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.
There are so many other riders and storylines from the COTA weekend we could talk about. I'm going to squeeze in a few. You two need to be brief with this because we are literally here all night at this point for 2 of us. So I'm going to go with the ones that got the most Members Club comments in terms of who to highlight. We're going to start on the negative with Joan Mir. Annie said, as the Honda seemingly improves, is Mir's continued crashing still due to a sudden lack of feeling, or is he pushing too much? Should he learn to accept 8th to 10th for now? Andy Moon says, Mir picked his Honda up from the gravel and it was still running. Do you think Honda's disabled the tip-over sensor because it's got unlimited engines due to concessions? I mean, if I was Honda, given how much Mir's crashing, I would still definitely have that sensor on, no matter how many engines I could use. Daniel Macbeth said, what did Honda do about Mir? I'm sick of getting excited about seeing him and Honda progressing. I need to watch him crash out yet again. And Michael Sanderson said, I'm fed up of the narrative of Mir's crashes being Honda's fault. Your job as a rider is to score as many points as possible. And after more than 2 seasons, Val is breaking his neck with how hard he's nodding. Overriding the bike isn't a good enough excuse for all of these crashes for me. You need to accept the bike can't do what you want it to and bank the points. Should he be worried about Honda replacing him in the near future? Before Val lays into Mir, let's hear Mir describing why he had his Austin crashes.
I feel that when I'm alone, I'm able to be super fast. I'm able to be very close to the position that we want to reach. But I feel that every time we start, we are in the race. I don't have the tools to overtake, to defend, to whatever. This produce that I have to right in a more offensive way, and make everything a lot worse. So it's a little bit what happened. We have to work on it. I have to work on how to manage these situations, because this situation is very different from the last year one. It's like we have potential, but we cannot do it we cannot get it out in some situations. So yeah, hopefully in Europe the tracks are shorter, smaller straights, and maybe we are able to do something more.
When you crashed, you were with Bastianini, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So you were basically, he was making a lot on the straight, and you were trying to get it back on the brakes.
Exactly. And if the race is now and I have a similar maneuver, I will crash again. I cannot avoid it.
So the bike steer is nice to ride but difficult to race.
Yes. I mean, it's nice to race, but to ride, but to race with it is a challenge.
I should say, I had not considered until concessions and stuff came up and limited engines. In American sports, there's a term called tanking, where you deliberately lose to get a better draft pick. Perhaps Joan Mir is deliberately tanking to keep Honda in concessions by not scoring any points. In which case, well done. Good long-term play. Look, he's a good rider. I've always been very complimentary. I think very highly of him as a very smart guy and a very likable guy who speaks well and is always a pleasure to listen to. And the MotoGP grid is better with a happy Joan Mir. I was really deeply unimpressed with this weekend, and the attempts to explain it away through the bike's deficiency in battle, whatever, etc., does nothing to me at all. Like, at a certain point, I remember we started the season with, well, at least he's crashing out of 7th instead of 17th now. I'm over that. I'm very over that. Still 0 points. How do you do that in qualifying, sprint, and the race, and then talk about how the bike is forcing you to fight instead of like apologizing 5 million times to your entire Honda team? How can they trust you to finish races after the past year? How can you expect them not to just find somebody else when your contract is up? Like, at this point, why should they think that you will magically stop doing this when they make the bike good? I'm despondent. I feel like I'm indignant for no reason. Like, I feel like I'm an idiot. Because I guess who cares, right? 6th, 7th place, whatever. It doesn't change Honda's history in MotoGP. It doesn't change Mir's career. He's a MotoGP champion. But, like, what are we doing here, brother? Like, how do you... The part that I like the least, and Simon won't let me lie, I remember, in his post-sprint debrief, he discusses a text conversation he had with Honda's new chief designer, Romano Albiciano, in which he's talking to Albiciano about top speed, and Albiciano's asking him to be a little bit calmer, and you just crash out of the race the next time again. For all those guys who've, all weekend helped you be the quickest Honda rider, helped put you into position to fight for, at least double-digit points, at least something. I know it's not a Ducati. I know it's clearly fighting the KTMs that are rockets on the straight is frustrating, but you had 2 attempts to reach a checkered flag here after you already crashed in qualifying, and you dunk those 2 attempts in the trash.
Also, like you say, okay, it's only 5th, 6th, 7th. He's been at Honda a little while now. 5th, 6th, 7th is massive for Honda in terms of its recent history. Okay, not its whole MotoGP history, but these are good results that he is currently, absolutely blowing. I feel, Val, like most of what you just said was a little preview of where Mir will end up in your rider rankings, which probably be out around about the same time as this podcast. Don't give any spoilers now. We did say on a recent podcast that we wondered if members might fancy Val doing a rankings debrief like Ed Straw does for our F1 rankings, where members can question Val about his choices and he can explain a few more. He is up for that, so look out for that if you're in the Members Club on Patreon. We'll put a little post up with all Val's rankings, and you can share your comments, and then Val will reply to them in a little video at some point. at some point this week. The other rider who got a lot of members' heat for crashing was Pedro Acosta. Kieran Sharkey said, would Pedro Acosta crash less on a different bike? And if this continues, will it make other manufacturers question whether they should take him from KTM? Thomas Knight said, at what point does Acosta start getting the reputation as someone who crashes too often? In his rookie season, it was frustrating and forgivable. It feels like he's still making the same mistakes this season. Jake Pienaar ZA, the ZA might be significant to this question, that is the phrasing of this point. Can we talk about this generational talent, Pedro Acosta, being upstaged by Brad Binder in race trim? No doubt Brad's got serious chops. If Pedro wants a better bike to win all these expected championships, he'll need to beat his teammate first. Acosta's crashes are the big thing in question there. Like Simon, we've seen Acosta hit the deck quite a few times this year. Not the only person doing that, but is he making team mistakes? Are we now at a point where we should be saying, no, can you stay on the bike, please?
I mean, I don't think so, because I mean, what's the best way to put this? I mean, it's not like Honda where the bike's improving. There is an element of, I mean, who really cares? Do you know what I mean? But like,
no, I get it.
There's visible frustration from Acosta every time we speak to him about the KTM situation, and you just kind of get the impression that, like, the whole thing is just like, who cares? I mean, his approach to it is, if I'm not going to win a race, then who cares where I finish? And the KTM approach is like, I don't know, like whatever they're thinking at the minute, like who cares if we, finish the race or not, as long as we've got the budget to turn up to the next one. There's just a real, like, Acosta is so frustrated with the situation at the minute that I don't think it matters to him that he's crashing. I think that he still remains so valuable to KTM and their longer term plans that they can't care if he's crashing or not at the minute, while they're the people that aren't giving him the bike that's good enough to crash on or to finish on. I mean, it's kind of like a, one of those like snakes where the snake is eating its own tail, that way. And it's just
Ouroboros.
Yeah. Because the bike isn't getting better and he's crashing because the bike's crap and the bike's crap, but it's not necessarily because he's crashing and just everyone is unhappy with the situation. And, he doesn't even really care where Brad Binder's finishing, because Pedro doesn't really care where anyone's finishing as long as he's not P1. Because he's like the fire that burns in that boy is intense. He's got the same killer passion as Marc Marquez did at that age. Like that shows. And I mean, if Marc Marquez at 21 was on a KTM, we'd be seeing exactly the same thing.
Yeah. If Marc Marquez was on a KTM right now, we'd be saying the exact same thing.
Well, there's that too.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
We saw the same thing when Marc Marquez was most recently on a Honda.
Is there anything in Kieran's point, though, that in terms of the rest of the paddock, if Acosta's crashing this much, might there be a bit of skepticism? Or
No.
I don't. There's two different things to look at in terms of our assessment and in terms of market value, right?
Yeah.
So for Joan Mir, I think those two things will come together, and I would be like a Galactus level hypocrite if I did that whole rant about Mir, which, by the way, maybe he's a little unhappy that this is a 3 a.m. recording, but unlucky, not unhappy, but and then let Pedro Acosta off the hook completely. I think he should be managing this a little bit better than he is. I do. But look, anybody would still trip over to sign him. Absolutely. He's just...
I think all we're seeing is maybe the first time that we're ever really seeing a bit of a reminder that he's still only 12 years old, whatever.
Yes.
19 just turned 20.
Yeah.
We are seeing kind of a sign that he is actually still, an immature teenager sometimes. And is not afraid to throw his toys out of the pram. And we have seen other riders of a similar talent and age do similar things in the past.
Yeah. Let's head to a positive, a bit of highlighting from Members Club. Jack Miller gets a lot of praise this week. Jack Miller, who finally got a chance to join Simon and have Members Club questions fired at him earlier this week as well. We'll be bringing you that before the next race. It went pretty well, didn't it, Simon?
Yeah, it did. There's everyone expects the goofy, dumb, jokey Jack Miller, and sometimes you get the quite thoughtful Jack Miller, and we got the latter one, and he was brilliant. He loved your guys' questions because they weren't the sort of questions that journalists asked him, and there was questions that I asked him that I thought, oh, this will be a 30-second answer, and we'll move on to the next question, and then it's like 8 minutes later, and I'm like looking at my watch, like, we've got more questions here, Jack. Like, I'm loving the honesty here, but so no, really good, really pleased with that.
We'll drop a snippet or two of that into the main feed episode next week, so you'll get a taste of that. But if you want the whole thing, come to the Members Club if you're not there already. The comments on Miller's weekend, which featured some nice conditions for Jack Miller to do his best Jack Miller stuff. Dan Neal said, how come Jack Miller is seemingly outperforming Fabio Quartararo? And Eric Yip said, shout out to Miller. Track conditions suited him, but fifth is very impressive. Before the season, people were questioning why he got the seat. Now he looks like maybe they should move him to the factory Yamaha to replace Alex Rins. Who wants to lead the Jack Miller praise? Val?
There's been so much focus on what Jack Miller doesn't do, and from us too. Much of it, like, because we know the limitations, slightly a bit crash prone and just not really to be trusted over a full race distance in most conditions. He will run out of the pace that others have, and he will have to roadblock it a bit to the finish. And I don't know why I introduced those two things in a segment praising him, because I'm just awful, I guess. But here's a bit of context to show that I do understand it. I want to make it clear that I do understand it when I say stuff like there are moments when I think he's the best rider in the world. And there's one moment on Friday, like not the race, not qualifying, whatever. So the track's drying, but it really does not look that great for slicks yet. Two riders come out of the pits on slicks finally for the crossover point. Those two riders are Luca Marini and Jack Miller. Marini does his first flying lap. He tiptoes 15 seconds off the pace. Miller does his first flying lap. He sets a personal best. It's the guy's talent level in kind of sketchy stuff. The guy's bravery in that kind of sketching stuff, but it's not just, dumb bravery switching off his brain or whatever. He's clearly an artiste in those kind of conditions, and he has been his entire MotoGP career, and that's how he won his first race, and it's how he should have won in that Argentina race that we brought up. It's Jack Miller's absolute best to a point where it makes me wonder. He's been a good MotoGP rider. He's had a good career. He's, even for all his limitations, in a normal MotoGP race, he's still, good to have, all right to have. There's a set of conditions where he's like the best guy you've ever seen, and you wonder, is there like a series that maybe you have that all the time and then you just win 50 titles there? Does that exist?
Motocross?
Well, yeah, I was like British Superbikes because of the weather is what I was thinking. But motocross is the logical one. But like the feel, I was so delighted by that Friday thing. It colored my whole impression of the rest of the weekend from there, because he keeps doing it. You can trust him to do it, and he seems to be more comfortable on the Yamaha in these conditions than on the KTM. And the Yamaha is a historically tragic bike in these conditions.
Yeah, true. Because we didn't see much of this at KTM, did we? The moments that should have been Jack Miller moments just weren't there.
Yeah, it's still all right. He was. I don't like. He wasn't.
We didn't have
bad, but he wasn't.
We didn't get the magic, did we? That was the thing. That wasn't like those laps we saw on Friday. I think we should call a halt to the episode at some point fairly soon. But two more riders I want you to take like 10 seconds each to talk about. Fabio Di Giannantonio, I think, deserves a nod. Back on the front row, back on the podium. Still sounding like he's taken a fair few painkillers and having a pretty hard time after his pre-season injury. But Simon, can we consider Digia back? And if he is back, what can he do with a GP 25-ish?
No, he's not back. That's the thing. He's really not back. There's more to come. And he's going to be the bane of Alex Marquez's existence before too long. He said it all weekend that, whenever he takes his shirt off and flexes in front of the mirror, that there's a very obvious difference in the two sides of his shoulders, that you can see the deltoid on this side and the broken side is just much, much smaller. And that he's been working really hard to get that muscle mass back in the gym, but it's not there yet. And that, he says now the benefit is that it used to be that it caused him pain and it tired him out. No, it just tires him out. But he's clearly having to work double time to, just to use that shoulder properly. So I think, especially somewhere as physical as here, it's fair to say that he isn't back yet, but it's getting there. And whenever he does it, it's going to be really good.
Val's very quick observation to not explode the runtime, but VR46 has this really stupid, dumb, awful situation where it has, of its two guys, Franco Morbidelli's very incisive and much more aggressive in wheel-to-wheel, and so far has been like fine, but like aggressive and making the overtakes he needs to make and putting himself in the positions he needs to be in, you know, at the expense of other riders, but not over the limit, doing it fine. And Fabio Di Giannantonio's faster, but he's the one losing out on those opening laps and increasingly losing out to Franco Morbidelli, to moves from Franco Morbidelli. That's got to be annoying for the VR46 bosses, because ideally you'd have one rider who combines both of those and then you forget about the other.
Val, your 10 seconds. We've got this far into the season without letting you bang on about Fermin Aldegar. I know he crashed at the end of the Grand Prix, but in terms of pace, in terms of that incisiveness as well, this is my... I don't follow Moto2 as avidly as you two do. I've seen enough to kind of know why you're banging on about him and why Ducati was impressed. But this was great from him, I thought, this weekend.
Yeah, so it was a good weekend. I mean, in the race, I wrote something like that he's going goober mode, which is because I expected the crash to come, and it came like 2 laps after I wrote that or something like that. But he had a very good late race pace. It just feels like he is finding his feet in very like specific bands of conditions, and in those bands you see the guy Ducati has signed, you see the guy Ducati has hired. He looked really good through Friday. It was really already impressive through Friday. He had a decent sprint, considering that he ended up at the back of the grid through no fault of his own at the start of the sprint. He ended up at the back because of the VR46 battling that slowed up Di Giannantonio, so we tied it nicely back together, and then rode a really nice, really cool race that ended how it was ever always going to end for the rookie. It's annoying. Yeah, I can't fully 100% excuse that, but whatever, fine. I will. I guess I have. He's still, the weekend as a whole still isn't totally coming together. It's still a bit like sketchy in parts, not just for the crash, but just generally session to session. But okay, all right, we're getting somewhere. It's getting interesting.
Obviously his English is still a work in progress and significantly better than my Spanish. I'm not criticising that at all, but it means it's kind of limited kind of supply of phrases he's turning to in his debriefs, and the one that kept coming up after the Grand Prix was "we can stay happy, we can stay happy, we can stay happy," and it was just basically his way of saying, okay, I've shunted, but look at all this stuff I've done as well. And it's like, absolutely.
I'm fairly sure that's a direct Frankie Carcettiism.
Yeah, I bet. Like I said, there's so much more we could delve into from Kota. So many big themes from the season so far that have just kind of crystallized into craziness during this Grand Prix of the Americas weekend. We'll get into a few more of those next week. We'll delve into more of your questions, members, next week. Thank you for everything you threw at us this weekend. Thank you for all the love you've shown Simon in the paddock and during the Race Moto meetup the other night as well. Val, how far have you got through your rider rankings right now? And did you start at the top or the bottom?
I follow my muse to weird places, so it's a random sequence.
Okay, great. Because just before the episode started recording this, he said he was on like 4 out of 22. He's chosen to stay up through the night and finish them, so look forward to reading those and see if you can work out which ones were written when he's been awake for 24 hours.
You should put him up on sub. It's going to be like half it's going to be in Russian for some reason. It's going to be great.
We'll let Val crack on with that. I'm going to bed. We're back in your ears next week.
The Athletic.